Moakley Park, located in South Boston, is undergoing a dramatic transformation. This City of Boston park has flown under the radar for decades, but in the future it will play a critical role in protecting the city from devastating climate change. Since 2017, Boston Parks and Recreation, working with Stoss Landscape Urbanism and an extensive consulting and stakeholder team, have been radically transforming this single-use recreational facility into a resilient, inclusive, and multifaceted 21st century community park. Currently in schematic design, the Moakley Park Resilience Plan is poised to address some of the city's most pressing climate resilience, social justice, and community health and welfare priorities. Abutting 30 acres of waterfront in South Boston, this 60-acre park is one of Boston's 6th biggest parks and the city's largest harborfront park. And importantly, it's a critical missing link in Olmsted's Emerald Necklace. Accessible by public transportation, Highway 93, and within 15 minutes of a diverse set of neighborhoods including South Boston, Chinatown, the South End, Roxbury, and Dorchester, Moakley Park is uniquely situated with viewsheds that reach the harbor islands. The surrounding context is changing, with major developments in the pipeline like the redevelopment of Mary Ellen McCormick housing, Washington Village with over 600 new residential units, and Dorchester Bay City with 1,700 units, University Place residences, and the Bayside Hotel, just to name a few. The population within walking range is expected to double. Yet these developments and Moakley Park's significant waterfront assets come with major risks. Sea level rise projections predict Moakley and the adjacent community to be impacted by between 21 to 40 inches within 50 to 60 years. For that reason, Moakley Park is a key focus area for the City of Boston and part of Climate Ready Boston. Launched in 2018 to help Boston plan for the impacts of climate change and build a resilient future, Climate Ready Boston lays out strategies along Boston's 47-mile shoreline to increase access and open space along the waterfront while better protecting the city during a major flooding event. So, this community park has become a critical resiliency asset for the City of Boston. Since 1909, the site has been actively used, serving as both garbage dump and playground. And more recently, in 1975, Carson Beach was a site where protesters converged to condemn discrimination practices and assert the right of all people to use Boston's public open spaces. As the planning, engineering, and design teams grapple with Moakley Park, major challenges converge to complicate the process. Flooding from sea level rise and storm surge are paramount concerns. Sea level rise projections predict Moakley to be impacted by between 21 to 40 inches within 50 to 60 years. At 40 inches during a 1% storm, floodwaters entering through the park critically inundate two public housing complexes, Mary Ellen McCormick and Old Colony, and join two other flood pathways that send water into the South End and other surrounding neighborhoods. Flooding is already common during high tide, and coupled with storm surge, Morrissey Boulevard, the approach to Moakley Park, is often underwater. Filled with harbor-dredged clay, the site's flat profile and impermeable soil wreak havoc today when mild rain events cause flooding, leaving the sports fields unusable. Even in the winter months, poor drainage is visible. Coupled with low ecological diversity and value and very little existing canopy and shade, the site doesn't have the green infrastructure necessary to mitigate the impacts of too much water. The flatness of the site additionally means that despite being close to the water, the beach is invisible from much of the park, further disconnecting the park from the beach.
So Moakley Park and Carson Beach are actually both really physically proximate, but unfortunately they are both kind of visually and physically disconnected, in part because of the topography in the park. It's very flat in the park, with the exception of the stadium here that you can see, where that's kind of an opportunity. You can get up and actually see over to the Carson Beach and the harbor beyond. In between them is Day Boulevard, and Day Boulevard is a place where cars are coming pretty fast. They're coming off the highway interchange to the south, and they're moving through there. There's only one lighted crossing across Day Boulevard, so people don't really come all day and spend time at Moakley Park and then head over to the beach, because you really don't know that they're there. If you're at Carson, you don't know Moakley's here, and if you're at Moakley, you don't necessarily know that Carson Beach is right there.
Compounding these risks are infrastructural challenges, both buried and on the surface. A complex web of underground utilities and challenging geotechnical conditions, coupled with a tangle of easements and dangerous 4 to 6 lane roadways, further impinge the planning and design process. In fact, the streets surrounding the park, including 2 large rotaries, are some of the most treacherous in the city, making park access restrictive, especially for the young and elderly, serving to isolate the park from the surrounding neighborhoods. Recreationally, to date, the park has been largely single-use, with 55% of the park dedicated to sports, with little programming to account for age and cultural preference. And, as mentioned, the park lies dormant in the winter months. As the team rethinks the park, diversity of program becomes a key equity and inclusion strategy. The existing community is varied culturally and economically, ranging from long-time older residents to young professionals to those in supportive housing, each with differing needs and expectations for the future of the park. Listening to the community's hopes and dreams for the park has been a priority for this project from day one.
I've been coming here for over 20-something years, and I like it. And I always bring the kids out because I learned a sick kid is not the best kid, but a healthy kid is the best kid. And outside air is the best thing to offer them. It's safe, it's free, doesn't cost you any money, and they have so much fun. You have to basically drag them back in the house, and that's like the worst. Saying like, let's go home, and the kid's like, no! So I've had to drag over 50 kids at home, and they're not happy with me. But when they get home and they eat something, they're like, okay, I had a good time. As a community member using this park, safety, family engagement, the park being cared for by the city officials who's supposed to care for it, and the homeless people came into the park and they started sleeping in the park, and then the drug users were leaving needles on the floor, so the kids have to sidestep the needles, remind them not to pick up the needles. So that's been very critical. Corona played a part of it, but they were already doing this before. We were fighting between the city and the state who's responsible to take care of the park, because one part is the city, one part is the state, and they were fighting back and forth. We had several meetings and we still hadn't settled who's supposed to take care of the park. the park has had 3 names change, and I mean, everybody comes in, they do all this glorying and they have all these big events, but after a while it fades and then the park starts to fade. If you notice, like, the grass is no longer as green as it used to be, and the grass is one of the main things about a park. It makes you smile when you see the grass. And then some of the playground, like the seats are broken, they haven't fixed that, and that's expected because you have children come into the park and you don't want kids to get hurt. And I feel like I see the police more in the park as opposed to before when I used to come to the park all the time. They only came for events, and they're more here for the homeless people and the drug users. And it's good, but it feels like they're overwatching us. And to some people it's a problem because you come here for freedom, some space, to escape the politics, escape all the stuff that's happening at home or in your life. And then if you see the police, it just reminds you of what's happening, about the shootings and the government fighting and people dividing and hating each other. And the park is supposed to make you feel like you're unified with nature. So you tend not to feel as much when you see some of these things in the park.
Yet, in addressing these resiliency and infrastructural challenges, compelling new opportunities emerge to embed solutions for other known community risks, like extreme heat, obesity, safety, education, environmental and social injustice.
Moakley Park is really critical to Boston's climate-ready strategy, especially coastal solutions along the waterfront. So one of the things that we're trying to do is expand waterfront access and expand recreational opportunity while also protecting communities from sea level rise. Well, Moakley Park is right in the heart of that. You have the ocean right over there. You have public housing right here. If we're able to build this park right, we can protect people and build a fantastic park at the same time. In the past, whether building on the Olmsted or the Eliot legacy of Boston, parks was really about recreational opportunities, and that's still very critical. But we can actually address equity concerns. We can expand healthy opportunities for our families, especially social equity and racial inequities, historical baked-in systemic racism. There are ways that Moakley can contribute to all of these different initiatives in the city while also protecting us from the impacts of the climate crisis. It's an extraordinary opportunity here at the park.
Community input was a critical driver in the planning process. By asking people directly, the team was able to uncover and discover additional opportunities to diversify programming to attract a broader audience, inclusive of all ages and abilities.
So we're thinking a lot about program here and trying to think about what kinds of things people would like to see.
Definitely a bike path. A nice walkable and a bike path I think would be great around here. And I guess you just have to make it for joggers, dogs, people just to walk around and enjoy the area. I think would be nice. I guess for the kids, some type of play area, I guess for the kids would be nice. Not a traditional playground, a little something different. I think would interest the kids around in this neighborhood. 'Cause regular playgrounds are kind of played out, so something a little bit more adventurous would be better. Nothing too dangerous, but a little bit more adventurous. Parents still have to watch their children,
What are some things that are missing in the park that you would like to see?
I feel like the basketball court over there can be more clean. Sometimes there's a lot of dirt on the ground and it's not very clean. Like people will throw trash somewhere. In the evening it's a little sketchy. I don't want to park my car. And the basketball court sometimes doesn't have the net anymore. So that's another thing. And it's not lighted. Like over here it's all dark. So that's one thing I like about the track field is in the evening it's always bright and it feels very safe over there.
Yeah, the stadium's really great.
Yeah.
What are some things that you would want to see here if you were to spend an entire day at Moakley Park or at the beach? What are some things that you would want or need?
More kids area.
Yeah.
Right now I have a 3-year-old daughter over there. I would definitely take her here more often if she has a more like playgrounds to play. Right now there's only one, and then it's not very pretty. I don't like that one actually. There are more other better playgrounds. More kids area would be better. Yeah.
I have some ideas to baseball people about building one good, decent baseball field with sports turf, and then there'd be open space for something else. They could use the other fields for something else, as long as we had a decent field to play on. Mm-hmm. Because you wouldn't believe how many games are canceled because of the puddles all over the place. High school games, they haven't played there all year, and maybe today, because of the conditions of the field and the rain and whatever.
Designing a new park, one that carefully considers equity, diversity, and inclusion in every detail, is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
So today, as you can see, the park is really largely about athletics. So there's a lot of ball fields in the stadium, and then there's not really a whole lot else to do. So equity and diversity come to play when we start to think about programming the park. That's one way. So, to begin with, we really have started to look at new types of things to do in the park. So the more we can diversify things like, a skate plaza, for example, or improving the playground, or making some better basketball courts, a community space, an event space, different kinds of things for different people to do in the park is a really important aspect of how we diversify the users.
In creating a berm for flood protection, there was also the opportunity to create new topography and add new biodiversity to the site. This created new nodes for recreation, opportunities to restore natural habitat, and manage stormwater effectively using green infrastructure. Through resiliency efforts, the team was able to restitch the park into the urban fabric and connect seamlessly with the waterfront. Championing multimodal transportation and safe access to other adjacent public open spaces like Harbor Walk, a 43-mile linear park along Boston's shoreline, present linkages that will benefit Bostonians well into the future.
How does Moakley Park connect to the Harbor Walk? So Moakley's 60 acres is adjacent to DCR's 35-acre Carson Beach. Together they make the city's largest waterfront park. And along the edge of the beach runs the Harbor Walk. It runs 43 of the 47 miles of the harbor's coastline. So it's really the connective tissue that will tie Moakley Park into the entire rest of Boston Harbor. The opportunities for the waterfront that Moakley brings are huge because of its size, because it is at the end of the Emerald Necklace, because of its proximity to Dorchester, Roxbury, the South End, Chinatown, South Boston. It's on the T. We've got 2 red line stops within easy access. It's accessible to all of the neighborhoods really in the city of Boston, and it has the potential to be a regional destination and really help to reorient ourselves to be more of a harbor city than we've ever been before.
Community input alongside engineering discovery were the major forces guiding resiliency planning and driving critical design decisions, always filtered through a lens of equity and inclusion. From the very beginning, the project has been molded by deep community engagement and expansive outreach. The team formed critical partnerships to expand reach and garner diverse input. Communication regarding the redesign has been continuous through a variety of programs. Prior to COVID-19, the foundation of the engagement strategy was through open houses, events, community meetings, and multilingual surveys. These efforts were amplified with digital and physical surveys, one-on-one interviews, and mapping activities. This allowed the team to initiate conversations with community members about how the park is used and better understand their hopes for its future. The pandemic demanded a rapid transformation of existing outreach, pushing the team to generate ideas to reach those traditionally left out of typical processes, using strategies such as online surveys, virtual tours, and interactive video meetings. Events like bike tours and movie nights and a winter warmer were spread over the course of the year, attracting a wide audience.
Coming soon to a park near you.
So you can see even at 8 o'clock, if this is correct, we'll have more storms in the Boston area.
Massive flooding swept through Boston.
Has completely come down State Street here.
37,000 homes and businesses lost power.
In a world of rising seas and stronger storms, Boston is investing in our public heroes to protect us from climate change and connect us to each other and the city we all love. The South Boston coast is a major path for storms and sea level rise that in the near future will flood South Boston, Dorchester, Roxbury, Chinatown, and the South End this summer from the producers of America's First Park and the Emerald Necklace. In the heart of Boston is a public hero who can rise up to stop this flood path and protect our city. Together with our neighbors, we have created a vision for a fun, vibrant, and flood-proof Moakley Park. Now, we need your help. Moakley is your park. We need your voice. Make Moakley yours.
Discover Moakley was a day-long community event organized to bring fun and energy to the park. Day Boulevard was closed, activating the street and enhancing the beach-park connection. Local vendors were invited to provide food and entertainment, as well as provide resiliency education and elicit community input. Feedback on the preliminary design plan informed subsequent design phases, and as the planning has progressed, the team has become more granular in their outreach, tapping different groups from skateboarders to parents groups for their specific input. Engagement is ongoing throughout each phase and will continue to inform the planning and design process. Engineering discoveries have also deeply impacted the park redesign. Geotechnical surveys revealed that soils that underlie the park will be prone to settling under new loads. As such, new structures and improvements must be designed to tolerate movement or with sufficient supporting foundations to mitigate any settlement. Hydrologic study revealed that future tidal conditions and peak rainfall will exceed the current system's capacity, and if not mitigated, will result in flooding of the park. Additionally, infrastructure, including large-scale Massachusetts Water Resources Authority and Boston Water and Sewer Commission piping, have complex interactions and effects on area-wide drainage, requiring further study to refine stormwater and groundwater models. And flood models identified the critical flood pathways that can be mitigated by a berm, yet as the park represents just one link in a chain of resiliency improvements, coordination with abutting areas will be required to maximize its effectiveness.
So we performed a series of baseline technical assessments to better understand the existing conditions of the park. So that included looking at subsurface soil conditions, as well as taking survey, working with Woods Hole Group on a coastal assessment, working with niche engineering on stormwater assessment, to better just get a picture of what the park looks like. So we did a series of subsurface investigations, and what we found is kind of what we expected in some regards, is that the park used to be the harbor. So we saw urban fill, which had undocumented, unengineered fill, varying from building debris to dredged clay from the harbor. And that was overlying sands and organics, which is what was expected with it being a marsh area in the past. And then we saw Boston blue clay, which is a deposit that is local to the Boston area. What we didn't expect to see was sort of the depths to bedrock. So in some areas of the site, we found bedrock at 65 feet, but for most of the site, we actually found it over 200 feet below ground surface. So that thick clay deposit really led a lot of the design considerations in terms of mitigating settlement with the proposed improvements at the site.
Utility and easement surveys required adjustments to the initial location of the berm to avoid impacts to subsurface infrastructure. This pushed the flood barrier farther into the park, creating a larger coastal landscape on the seaward side. The Moakley Park project, while complex from both a civic engagement and engineering standpoint, has succeeded due to an intensely collaborative mindset, both within the consulting team and externally, between city agencies and critical stakeholders. Flexibility and an openness to iteration and evolution have been the hallmarks of this ongoing process.
Collaboration is such a huge part of this project. No one firm involved here could do this alone. We have such an amazing team. We've got engineers of all kinds, from geotechnical to stormwater management to environmental. We have people who are, specialists in coastal flood protection. They're all critical to understanding kind of how the project works and how it operates from a coastal flood management and future adaptation to climate change. We've got landscape architects, economists, people who specialize in programming. So it's this huge, amazing, wonderful team, all of whom really work together super well. And on top of that, we've kind of enlisted a number of community advocacy groups. So Kathy Lafferty from the South Boston Neighborhood House, and then Kathy Abbott from Boston Harbor Now, really are important to the way that the park is seen and seen as really part of the community moving forward, into the future. That collaboration, it's taken some time to build it. It started with the intention of Parks Department to really make this a bigger and better park, and then through our team, just continuing to bring in new people. And we're always bringing in new ones. So even just recently, we've brought in, a specific equity consultant, because that ensuring that we're really talking to a really representative group of people and talking to those people who often don't have their voice heard is really important, and it's an important part of the collaboration.
Moakley's really exciting. It's a 60-acre park. It's Boston's largest harborfront park, but one with a whole series of access problems. How do you get to the park? And once you're in the park, how do you connect to the harbor, which is just across the street, but seemingly so far away? With the renovation plans, we've really focused on designing the park in 3 major areas. The first along the city edge, all the way along Old Colony Avenue and Columbia Road. The idea being to create a whole series of activity areas that give program activities and constantly changing events for the community members who live right across the street and just around the corner. With that comes safe access, safe crossings to the park, raised bike lanes, areas to walk, areas to sit, and areas that are organized by age group so that young kids, elders, and everybody in between have a series of places that they can go to, play basketball, play on playground equipment, sit and chat with one another, run, bike, whatever it is. Having those amenities right across the street is really important. The middle part of the park is really devoted to sport and play. How do we upgrade a lot of the recreational facilities, the sport fields that are already here, and then wrap in a whole series of other experiences and other programs and activities, a destination adventure playground, shady groves, a whole series of gardens, places for bird watching and creating new forms of nature. and a renovated stadium. All of these really in the heart of the park. And then the third area of the park is the coastal park. It includes an integrated flood berm that'll protect the park from coastal inundation, but offers amazing views out to the harbor, across Carson Beach, a whole series of areas that are reminiscent of dunescapes and coastal marshes, integrated with areas for play and events and gathering. So an amphitheater that allows for different kinds of activities, a water feature, flex and play lawns, and then a couple really amazing new picnic areas, one of which is at this new overlook that looks out to the old harbor and the Boston Harbor Islands and beyond. Really incredible set of experiences interwoven with each other and really creating a series of different kinds of activities that you can imagine bringing your family to many different days of the year, really spending the day and evening at the park and on the beach.
The design approach centered on dividing the park into 3 distinct zones, which provided a mechanism to address both micro and macro level challenges. The city edge, core and crest, and coastal park were defined by their adjacencies as well as their respective program goals and constraints. The coastal flood management strategy is integrated throughout the park and is designed to provide both environmental and social benefits. An engineered flood protection wall or berm is embedded into the topography and runs the length of the park, creating new nodes for play, exploration, year-round recreation, and improved biodiversity. Along the city edge, the team focused on critical issues around access and connectivity, carefully considering how people enter and circulate through the park, promoting rich opportunities for social interaction. The edge is a tree-lined community path, running trail, and raised cycle track that creates a linear element around the perimeter of the park. It is defined by its extension outward into the neighborhood, promoting safe connections for pedestrians, cyclists, people arriving from the bus and the T. And it's characterized by an inward expansion, creating active nodes for multi-generational and multicultural users, specifically tailored to meet the needs of the most immediate residents. Play is central, featuring water play, playgrounds, a skate park, street hockey, basketball, a fitness plaza, bocce, table games, and active community centers for neighborhood activities. The crest and core, the inner layer of the park, expands and diversifies recreational amenities. In this zone, the alignment of the flood management berm was critical. It's woven through the landscape and layered in park programming to create protections without disconnecting the city from the waterfront. Sports field layout is designed to promote maximum functionality, program, diversity of users, and flexibility, and features 4 multi-use fields to accommodate lacrosse, rugby, soccer, flag football, as well as community events. A 3-leaf clover includes a mix of Little League, softball, and baseball fields, as well as 1 premier baseball field to the north. Spaces in between fields become new destinations within the park. For example, a large nature play area encourages exploration for people of all ages and abilities. And attention is paid to ensure that program is available during all 4 seasons. With the flood barrier placement westward, the coastal park features a larger coastal footprint, providing a critical connection between the park and the waterfront at Carson Beach, allowing water into the site through a floodable landscape along the eastern edge. Layered beach nourishment and dune restoration soften the impact of wave action and have social and ecological co-benefits, including diversity in planting palettes and coastal habitats. Flanked on the north and south sides by a coastal landscape of dunes and marshes, this area allows for more passive activities like birdwatching, boardwalks, picnicking, and offers flex fields for impromptu pickup games. Additionally, this area features a central waterfront plaza and amphitheater designed for year-round use, a fountain in the summer, ice skating in the winter, and can host festivals, performances, and food trucks. Innovative green infrastructure strategies are also incorporated across the site, including stormwater meadows, corridors, tree trenches, and porous pavement. The site will see a reduction in urban heat island effect and an increase in biodiversity through the introduction of over 500 new trees and a mix of native plants, including coastal marsh species, maritime shrublands, and woodland communities.
So it's interesting. Moakley Park can serve as a model for what a new 21st century park will be. Way back in the 19th century, when Olmsted was essentially inventing urban parks across North America, he was very much interested in improving public health, improving the quality of the environment, and offering people a respite from the toils of the what was then a very industrial city. What's interesting today is how many of Olmsted's principles remain in place and how we are refining or advancing some other principles as well through the park. Social equity being one of those. How is it that we make parks like this more accessible to all of our community members, particularly those that have been historically disadvantaged, particularly those that are brown and black skinned, and just simply don't have access to large-scale parks like this. We saw through COVID, for instance, how important big parks are and connections to big parks. And Moakley really reinforces that idea that you can create a big park that can hold a lot of people, but might also have connective tentacles, in this case, out to neighborhoods in Dorchester and Roxbury and Chinatown that really offer direct, safe connections from those neighborhoods, which are probably the most impacted by COVID and urban heat island, and have allow those kids and families to have direct access to the park and to the harbor front. And so we do that by providing better access. We do that by providing better programming. The kinds of activities that you would do in the park are far more diverse. This kind of park is actually much more active than an Olmstedian park would be, which was in very many ways passive. In it allowed you to experience the environment, which is really important. But we're also looking for areas where people can run, where people can play, where people can do all sorts of things, as well as have moments of leisure and quiet within the urban fabric. And so in terms of the way the project takes on resiliency, new challenges for climate change and resiliency, the way it deals with social equity, the way it integrates many forms of infrastructure, stormwater, coastal flooding, and the way it just creates new activity spaces in the middle of the city. And in all these ways, I think Moakley can be held up as a model for how we think about park planning and design moving forward.
The Moakley Park Resiliency Plan represents a rare opportunity to create a modern 21st century community park that addresses pressing climate change needs while also prioritizing social, cultural, economic, and environmental equity. The planning process has been inclusive, deliberative, and responsive to community needs, and will result in a park that is safe, biodiverse, culturally rich, and recreationally expansive. While currently in schematic design, once realized over the course of the next few years, this plan will not only protect the vulnerable at its edges from devastating flooding, but will provide an unparalleled amenity for the city of Boston.
We have an amazing concept, we have a wonderful design, it's community vetted, and now we got to get into phasing, and there are opportunities to do that. I mean, Moakley Park will be the completion of Olmsted's vision of the Emerald Necklace. That's a huge asset for the city of Boston.
That the park is free. You go to many other areas and people are charging or saying that the park is for only private use. So this park is free. It's open to anyone.